My name is Eleanor Blackwood, and at 73 years old, I thought I knew everything about betrayal. After all, I'd survived a cheating husband, backstabbing business partners, and 40 years of cutthroat real estate dealings in Charleston, South Carolina. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day my own flesh and blood looked me in the eye and called me to slow to handle my own fortune. Standing in my marble-floored foyer that September morning, watching my 25-year-old grandson Marcus pack my late husband's golf clubs into boxes marked donation, I felt something cold settle in my chest, not grief I'd already mourned. Reginald's passing 6 months earlier, this was something sharper, something that whispered of secrets yet to be discovered and revenge yet to be served. Before I tell you exactly how my grandson tried to steal everything from me, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a family member betray your trust? Someone you loved who saw dollar signs instead of your heart? If so, please share your story in the comments below. We read every single one, and we'd love to feature your experience in a future video. Trust me, after you hear what Marcus did next, you'll have plenty to say about family loyalty. The Blackwood estate sat on 12 acres of prime Charleston real estate, complete with an antebellum mansion and gardens that had been featured in Southern Living magazine 3 times. From my bedroom window, I could see the Ashley River winding through the marsh grass, the same view that had enchanted me when Reginald first brought me here as his young bride 50 years ago. But that September morning, I wasn't admiring the scenery. I was watching Marcus load another box into his silver BMW, his movements quick and efficient, too efficient for someone who was supposedly grief-stricken over his grandfather's death. Grandmother Eleanor. His voice drifted up from the foyer, syrupy sweet in that way that had charmed teachers and gotten him out of trouble his entire life. I've finished with grandfather's study. Should I start on the library next? I made my way downstairs, my silk robe rustling against the mahogany banister. Marcus stood surrounded by boxes, his sandy hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, his expensive watch catching the morning light. "You're up early, darling," I said, accepting his kiss on my cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne and ambition. Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. He gestured at the boxes. "I know how hard this must be for you, going through grandfather's things. I thought I'd help speed up the process, even then." Those words sent a chill down my spine. "Actually, grandmother, I was hoping we could talk." Marcus took my elbow, guiding me toward the living room. "About your future, about the house, about everything." I allowed him to settle me into my favorite wingback chair, the one positioned perfectly to see anyone who entered the room. "What's on your mind, dear?" Marcus perched on the edge of the sofa, leaning forward with an earnestness that would have been convincing if I hadn't seen him practice the same expression before asking his parents for a car at 6. "I've been talking to Mom and Dad, and we're all worried about you. This house is so big, so isolated, and with grandfather gone," he let his voice trail off meaningfully. "I'm managing just fine, Marcus, but for how long?" The question came out sharper than he'd probably intended. He quickly softened his tone. "I mean, the upkeep alone must be enormous, the taxes, the staff, the maintenance. And you're not getting any younger." There it was, the opening gambit in what I was beginning to suspect was a carefully orchestrated campaign. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm not getting any younger. At 73, I suppose I am rather. What's the word you young people use? Slow." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or satisfaction. "I didn't say that, grandmother." "No, but you're thinking it. Well, there are some wonderful retirement communities in Charleston. Ocean View Manor has an excellent reputation. You'd have your own apartment, but with medical staff on call, activities, people your own age, and the house. Well, I suppose it would have to be sold, to pay for your care, of course, but don't worry about any of that. I'd be happy to handle all the details for you. The real estate market. The legal paperwork. Everything. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. How generous of you, Marcus. You'd really take care of everything. Of course, family takes care of family, right? Family takes care of family. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with one of Reginald's antique letter openers. After Marcus left, I stood in my foyer for a long moment, listening to the silence of the old house for the first time in decades. I felt truly alone, not because Reginald was gone. I'd made my peace with that, but because the young man I'd helped raise had just looked me in the eye and started calculating my worth. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since Reginald's funeral. I entered his private office. The room still smelled of his pipe tobacco and the leather-bound books that lined the walls. I walked to the bookshelf behind his desk and found what I was looking for, a first edition of The Great Gatsby that contained a small brass key taped inside. The key opened a hidden drawer in Reginald's desk, a secret I'd kept even from our children. Inside was a manila folder containing documents that even our family lawyer didn't know existed. 5 years ago, when Reginald's health started failing, he'd quietly transferred ownership of the Charleston estate to a trust, not just any trust, a trust that I controlled completely, with very specific conditions about how and when it could be dissolved. On paper, I appeared to own nothing more than a modest bank account and some jewelry. The house, the land, the rental properties downtown, all of it belonged to the Eleanor Blackwood Charitable Trust, with me as the sole trustee. But there was more. 6 months before his death, Reginald had signed one final document, a provision that if anyone in the family attempted to have me declared incompetent or tried to force me from the house, they would forfeit any claim to inheritance. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Hello, Margaret, this is Eleanor Blackwood. Is Thaddeus available? I need to discuss some family matters." 20 minutes later, Charleston's premier private investigator was sitting across from me in Reginald's study. "You want me to investigate your own grandson?" Thaddeus Crane asked, his thick southern accent making the question sound even more incredulous. "I want to know what I'm dealing with," I said firmly. "If I'm wrong, then no harm done. But if I'm right, if you're right, then that boy's about to learn why folks in this town still cross the street when they see a Blackwood coming." 3 weeks later, Thaddeus called with his report. What he'd discovered made my blood run cold. Marcus had been in financial trouble for over a year. Gambling debts, bad investments, a lifestyle funded entirely by credit cards and false promises. But worse than that, he'd been actively working to have me declared mentally incompetent, meeting with lawyers and even a doctor who specialized in geriatric assessments. "There's more," Thaddeus said grimly. "He's not working alone. Your daughter-in-law, Patricia, has been helping him. They've already picked out the retirement home and started the paperwork to put the house on the market. Patricia, Marcus's mother, my son Robert's wife. The woman I'd welcomed into the family 26 years ago." "How long do I have?" I asked, based on their timeline. "Maybe a month before they make their move. They're planning to present you with a united family front, then suggest the competency evaluation. A month. For weeks to outmaneuver a grandson who thought I was too slow to keep up with his schemes." The next morning, I called Marcus and asked him to come over for lunch. He arrived with white roses, my favorites, and that same concerned smile I was learning to hate. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, playing my part perfectly, the slightly confused elderly woman, overwhelmed by managing her late husband's affairs. "About the house being too much for me." Marcus set down his fork, suddenly very attentive. "Oh, Oh, you're right. It is overwhelming. Sometimes I feel like my mind isn't as sharp as it used to be. That's completely normal, grandmother. Grief can be very disorienting, is it? Because sometimes I can't remember if I've paid the bills or if I've already called Rosa about grocery shopping. I looked at him with what I hoped was convincing vulnerability. Yesterday, I spent 20 minutes looking for my reading glasses. They were on my head the entire time. The calculation in Marcus's eyes was so obvious it was almost insulting. But Marcus, I reached across the table and took his hand. What about all of Reginald's legal documents, his will? The business papers, I don't understand half of what's in his study. Don't worry about any of that. I can handle it all for you. But shouldn't we involve a lawyer, someone objective? Why involve strangers in family business? Besides, lawyers are expensive, and honestly, grandmother, some of them might try to take advantage of someone in your situation, my situation. As if grief had rendered me incapable of rational thought, after lunch, I walked him to the door, playing the part of the grateful, dependent grandmother. But as his BMW disappeared down the oak-lined drive, I allowed myself a cold smile. It was time to give Marcus exactly what he wanted and exactly what he deserved. 2 days later, I made a phone call that would set everything in motion. Marcus, darling, could you come over this afternoon? I've made a decision about the house, and I'd like to discuss it with you. He arrived within an hour, practically vibrating with excitement. I met him in Reginald's study, where I'd carefully arranged several documents on the desk. I've been going through Reginald's papers, trying to understand our financial situation, I began, settling into Reginald's chair with a sigh. It's also complicated. Trusts and investments and tax implications. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. I'd be happy to help you sort through everything, would you? Oh, that would be such a relief. I picked up a folder from the desk one that Thaddeus had helped me prepare. This seems to be the most important document. Something about a discretionary fund that Reginald set up years ago. I handed him the folder, watching his face as he scanned the fabricated documents inside. According to the papers, the Eleanor Blackwood discretionary fund contained assets worth approximately $3 million, money that could be accessed at my discretion for personal care and living expenses. This is quite a substantial sum, Marcus said carefully, is it? I'm afraid I don't understand these financial terms very well. I leaned back in the chair, looking every inch the confused widow. Reginald always handled the money. The greed in Marcus's eyes was so naked it was almost laughable. Grandmother, have you spoken to anyone else about this fund? Only you, dear. I thought perhaps you could help me understand how to access it for the retirement home. You know, of course, but grandmother, accessing a fund like this can be quite complicated. It might be easier if someone else handled the paperwork for you, someone like you. I'd be honored to help. In fact, it might be simplest if I were added to the account as a co-signatory. That way, I could handle any transactions on your behalf. And there it was. The moment I'd been waiting for. That sounds wonderful, I said, my voice trembling with what he probably took for gratitude but was actually rage. How would we arrange something like that? I could speak to the bank on Monday, set up an appointment for us to meet with the account manager. There is one thing, though, Marcus continued. A fund like this really should be managed by someone who understands financial markets, perhaps. It would make sense to transfer the funds to an account that I could manage directly. The audacity was breathtaking. In 15 minutes. He'd gone from offering to help to suggesting that I hand over complete control of what he believed was a $23 million fund. I suppose that makes sense, I said slowly. Of course it is, but grandmother, decisions like this are really better made sooner rather than later, while you're still mentally sharp enough to understand the implications. 3 days. Marcus was planning to steal my life savings in 3 days. That sounds perfect, I said. Should I bring anything specific to the meeting? Just your identification and the original trust documents. I'll handle everything else Thursday evening. The night before our scheduled bank meeting, I received a phone call that nearly broke my heart. Grandmother Eleanor. It's Robert. My son's voice sounded strained, formal in a way that set off alarm bells in my head. Hello, darling, how are you? I'm concerned about you, actually. Marcus told me about your meeting tomorrow. The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had gone to his father, my own son, and painted me as the confused, vulnerable widow, did he? Eleanor, I think we need to talk. Patricia and I are coming over. 20 minutes later, I opened my front door to find my son and daughter-in-law standing on my porch. Their faces arranged in expressions of loving concern. Mom, Robert began. Using the tone one might use with a confused child, Marcus tells me you've been struggling with some of Dad's financial documents. He says you're planning to transfer a significant sum of money into his control tomorrow. Mom, that concerns me. For a wild moment, I thought he might be there to protect me from Marcus's scheme. Then Patricia spoke. We're worried about your judgment, Eleanor. Grief can affect people in different ways, and sometimes it impairs decision-making. Abilities, my judgment is fine. Patricia, is it? Robert leaned forward. Mom, when was the last time you balanced your checkbook? I stared at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and supported. Are you questioning my mental competence, Robert? I'm questioning whether you're thinking clearly about financial matters. We think you should consider having a professional assessment done, Robert said. Just to establish your current mental state for legal purposes, a competency evaluation, nothing dramatic, Patricia said quickly. Just a consultation with a geriatric specialist, and if this specialist decides I'm not capable, then we'd help you set up a proper guardianship arrangement, someone to oversee your finances, someone like Robert, no doubt my own son. Asking a doctor to declare me mentally incompetent so he could control my money, I've already made an appointment. Robert said, tomorrow afternoon. After your meeting at the bank, tomorrow afternoon. They'd planned it all out. Marcus would get me to sign over the fake trust fund in the morning. Then Robert would have me declared incompetent in the afternoon. Well, I said, standing up with what I hoped looked like resigned acceptance. I suppose if you think it's necessary. After they left, I walked through my empty house, seeing it with new eyes, every photograph, every piece of furniture, every painting, all of it was being mentally catalogued and divided up by my loving family. I called Thaddeus. Are you ready for tomorrow? Everything's in place. He confirmed. The bank manager is briefed. The fake account is set up. And I'll be recording everything. And the other matter. Dr. Harrison has been educated about the situation. Friday morning dawned grey and humid. I dressed carefully a navy blue suit that Reginald had always loved. Pearls that had belonged to his mother, and the diamond wedding ring that had graced my finger for 50 years. Marcus arrived at precisely 9:30, dressed in his best suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Good morning, grandmother, ready for our meeting. Inside the bank, we were escorted to a private conference room where Margaret Ashton, the senior vice president, was waiting with official-looking documents. Mrs. Blackwood, she said warmly. So good to see you again. Thank you, Margaret. I believe you know my grandson, Marcus. For the next 20 minutes, I played my part perfectly, the confused widow, grateful for her grandson's help. Signing papers she didn't quite understand, Marcus guided me through each signature. His voice patient and loving, his eyes bright with greed. There, he said finally, all finished. Margaret, how long before the transfer is complete? Everything should be processed by Monday, she said. The funds will be available immediately. Excellent. Marcus patted my hand. Don't worry about anything, grandmother. I'll take good care of everything. We stood to leave, Marcus practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh, Marcus," Margaret called as we reached the door. "There is one small matter we should discuss." "What's that?" Margaret's smile became razor-sharp. "The fraud charges." The colour drained from Marcus's face. "I'm sorry." "The fraud charges that will be filed against you the moment you attempt to access the account you just set up." I turned to face my grandson, letting the confused old lady mask slip away. "You see, darling, there is no $23 million discretionary fund. Never was. Those documents you've been salivating over. Complete fabrications." Marcus stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "But the papers, I showed you exactly what I wanted you to see. And you saw exactly what your greed made you see." I stepped closer. "Did you really think I was so senile that I wouldn't notice you measuring my house, that I wouldn't hear you whispering about competency evaluations?" "Grandmother, you what? You were trying to help me. By stealing from me, by having me declared mentally incompetent." As if on cue, the conference room door opened, and Robert and Patricia walked in, followed by a distinguished gentleman in an expensive suit. "Mom," Robert looked confused, taking in the scene. "Hello, Robert, Patricia, Dr. Harrison, I presume." The doctor stepped forward. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Dr. James Harrison. Your son asked me to conduct a brief cognitive assessment." "Oh, but doctor, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." I turned to face my son. "You see, Robert, I'm not the one whose judgment should be questioned here." I gestured toward Marcus. "Your son just attempted to defraud me of what he believed was $23 million. The entire transaction was recorded." Robert's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that for the past month, your family has been plotting to have me declared incompetent so you could steal my inheritance." I pulled a manila folder from my purse. "Fortunately, your father was smarter than all of you combined." I handed the folder to Dr. Harrison. "Doctor, I'd like your opinion on these documents, specifically the psychological evaluation that was conducted on me last week." Dr. Harrison opened the folder, his eyebrows rising. "This is quite comprehensive. According to this evaluation, your mental acuity is not only normal, it's exceptional. Your strategic thinking abilities are in the 95th percentile." "Strategic thinking," I repeated, savoring the words. Patricia found her voice first. "Eleanor, what is this? What's going on?" "What's going on, Patricia, is that you seriously underestimated me." I walked to the head of the conference table. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice Marcus photographing Reginald's study? That I wouldn't overhear your phone conversations about retirement homes?" I opened my purse and pulled out photographs. "These are surveillance photos taken over the past 3 weeks. Marcus meeting with lawyers, Patricia researching my houses. Market value, you, Robert, visiting Oceanview Manor." I spread the photos across the table. "You planned this so carefully, didn't you?" "Except for one small problem, I understood everything perfectly." Margaret cleared her throat. "Mrs. Blackwood, what would you like us to do about the attempted fraud?" I looked at Marcus. "I want charges filed. Wire fraud, attempted elderly abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud." "Mom," Robert stepped forward. "You can't be serious. He's your grandson. He's a thief who looked me in the eye and called me slow to manage my own affairs." "Mrs. Ashton," I said calmly, "would you please play the recording?" Margaret pressed a button on a device that had been sitting on the table. Suddenly, Marcus's voice filled the room. "Transfer the entire balance to an account that I could manage directly. Decisions like this are really better made while you're still mentally sharp enough to understand the implications." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus sank into a chair. "Oh, God, what have I done?" "You've shown me exactly who you are," I said softly. "All of you have." Robert was staring at his son. "Marcus, how could you try to steal from your own grandmother? Don't you dare act innocent." This was your idea, you and Mom. Talking about having her declared incompetent, that was different. We were trying to protect the family assets. From who? From me? I laughed bitterly. Robert, I am the family assets. I pulled out one final document, the real trust agreement, the house. The investments, the rental properties, all of it, belongs to a trust that I control absolutely. A trust that specifically states that anyone who attempts to have me declared incompetent forfeits any right to inheritance. The blood drained from Robert's face. What are you saying? I'm saying that you just talked yourself out of everything. Son, all of you. Doctor, Harrison stood. Amars, Blackwood, I believe my services are no longer needed. If you ever need a professional opinion on your mental state, I'd be happy to testify that you're one of the sharpest people I've ever encountered. After he left, the four of us sat in silence. Mom, Robert said finally, what happens now? I walked to the window, looking out at the Charleston skyline. Now you live with the consequences of your choices. Marcus will face criminal charges. You and Patricia will have to explain why your son tried to defraud his elderly grandmother. And all of you will live with the knowledge that you were willing to betray someone who loved you unconditionally, and us. Robert asked quietly. I looked at my son. That depends on whether you can find your way back to being the man I thought I raised. I gathered my purse and walked toward the door. Margaret, please proceed with the criminal charges at the door. I turned back one last time. Marcus, you were right about one thing. I am too slow. Too slow to understand how my own family could look at me and see nothing but dollar signs. I opened the door, but I'm learning. At 73, I'm finally learning to be fast enough to protect myself from the people who claim to love me. 3 months later, I was sitting in my garden, watching the October sunset paint the Ashley River in shades of gold. The charges against Marcus had been filed. Robert and Patricia had moved to Atlanta. Unable to face the scandal, I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. The sound of footsteps made me look up. Marcus was walking toward me, thinner than he'd been, his face gaunt but somehow cleaner. Hello, grandmother, Marcus. I gestured to the chair beside me. Would you like to sit? He sat carefully. For several minutes, we watched the sun sink toward the horizon. I've been going to counseling, he said finally, for gambling addiction. The counselor says I need to make amends. I waited. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry for trying to steal from you. I'm sorry for lying. I'm sorry for thinking you were weak and stupid. His voice cracked. I'm sorry for breaking your heart. I looked at this young man who'd once been the light of my life. Why? I asked simply. The gambling started in college. I owed money to people who don't accept I owe us. I was desperate, and the plan to have me declared incompetent. Marcus flinched. That was Dad's idea. Actually, when I told him about my debts, he suggested maybe it would be better if he took control, just temporarily, until I died. You mean I didn't think of it that way then? I told myself we were helping you. He looked at me with eyes that seemed decades older. But that's not true. We were protecting ourselves from you making decisions we didn't like. I nodded slowly. At least you're being honest now, grandmother. I know you'll never forgive me. I know I've destroyed our relationship forever, but I need you to know that I understand what I did. I didn't just try to steal your money, I tried to steal your dignity, your independence. Tears were running down his cheeks now. I looked at you and saw a weak old woman instead of the brilliant, strong person who helped raise me. I forgot that you built a successful business alongside grandfather. I forgot that you were the one who taught me to be strategic. He laughed bitterly, and then I was shocked when you outmaneuvered me completely. You called me too slow. I said quietly. You weren't too slow. I was too blind, too greedy, and too stupid to see that the woman who raised me was smarter than I'd ever be. We sat in silence as the last light faded from the sky. What will you do now? I asked, plead guilty, accept whatever sentence they give me, try to rebuild my life without gambling, without thinking I'm entitled to things I haven't earned. He looked at me hopefully. Maybe someday you might be able to forgive me, I thought. About forgiveness, about love and betrayal, and the complicated mathematics of family relationships. Marcus, I said finally. Do you remember the story your grandfather used to tell about the oak tree in the front yard? Marcus nodded. He said it survived Hurricane Hugo because its roots went deep enough to anchor it, but its branches were flexible enough to bend without breaking. That's right. He always said it was a metaphor for family, strong roots, flexible branches. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. I've spoken to the prosecutor. I'm not dropping the charges you need to face the consequences. But I've agreed to provide a character reference for your sentencing hearing. Marcus stared at the envelope. What is that? A letter to the judge, asking for the minimum sentence, with provisions for community service and continued therapy. I held his gaze. I'm also withdrawing my objection to your inheritance from your grandfather's personal estate. But the trust document said anyone who tried to have you declared incompetent. That clause applies to my trust, not to Reginald's will. You'll inherit what he left you, not a fortune, but enough to start over. Marcus was crying again. Why? After everything I did, because despite everything, you're still my grandson, because I believe people can change, and because sometimes being slow means taking the time to choose love over revenge. I handed him the envelope. Your grandfather always said that the strongest trees weather storms together. Their roots intertwine underground, supporting each other even when their branches are battered. Marcus clutched the envelope. I love you, grandmother. I know I don't deserve to say that. But I love you. I love you too, Marcus, even when I was furious with you. Even when I was plotting your downfall, I never stopped loving you. What about Dad and Mom? I sighed. That's more complicated. Robert needs to understand why he was willing to betray me. Whether your father can accept that about his wife is his choice. Will they be welcome here again? Someday, perhaps, if they can prove they've learned from this experience. Marcus stood to leave, then turned back. Grandmother, that fake trust fund, where did you get the idea for that specific amount? I smiled. That, my dear boy, was exactly the amount you owed to your various creditors. I had it all investigated, down to the penny. Marcus's eyes widened. You knew about all my debts. I told you I was 3 steps ahead of you the entire time. I stood and walked toward the house. Oh, and Marcus, there's one more thing. What's that? The real trust fund, the one that actually exists. It's worth considerably more than $23 million. When I die, assuming you've proven yourself worthy of forgiveness, you'll inherit 1/3 of it. Marcus stared at me in shock. But if you'd told me that from the beginning, if I'd told you that from the beginning, you would have manipulated me in a different way. You would have been the perfect grandson until I died, then celebrated your inheritance. This way, you had to confront who you really were. I paused at the back door. The choice was never about the money, Marcus. It was about whether you could love me more than you loved what I could give you. As I watched him walk away through the gathering darkness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Not the cold satisfaction of revenge, but the warm glow of hope. Marcus had a long road ahead of him. But for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I believed he might actually walk that road. And if he truly learned to value love over greed, then maybe we could find our way back to each other. After all, being slow isn't always a weakness. Sometimes it means having the patience to wait for the people you love to find their way home. Thank you for listening to my story about family, betrayal, and the power of forgiveness. If you've experienced something similar with your own family members, whether it's financial manipulation, being underestimated because of your age, or Having to choose between justice and mercy? Please share your story in the comments below. We read every single comment, and we'd love to feature your experience in a future video. Your story could help someone else who's facing a similar situation. Remember, it's never too late to be underestimated, and it's never too late to prove them wrong.